Welcome back to the Dershow. I'm at the lounge at the airport in Paris on the way to Dubrovnik. And I was planning perhaps not to have a show tonight because of the travel. But then a New York Times report came in 5 minutes ago, which I think may change history, and I have to comment on it. The New York Times reported that President Biden is now telling friends that he is considering dropping out of the race. Um, I think that's the first signal that he's going to drop out of the race. Now, I'm not making a prediction here because I don't know the internal thinking of Joseph Biden, but I can't imagine that he would be telling any friends that he's considering dropping out of the race if he wasn't going to drop out of the race. So I suspect we will see over the next 10 days, maybe, a decision. Now, some of it may depend on his appearance this weekend in a debate, in a conversation with George Stephanopoulos. Stephanopoulos will give him a friendly hearing. He will give him every opportunity to show his strength, but and he will be able to have cue cards and have all the support he needs. But the question is, can he do it? And he'll have to have a press conference. He'll have to do some other things to show the American public that he's up to it. You know, it's interesting that even after the debate, his poll numbers haven't dropped dramatically. He's still virtually within the range of errors in most polls, including in swing states. So, you know, he's not out of the race. And the question really is, will anybody who replaces him do better? The polls show that Kamala Harris does slightly better than he does, but that's before she's been involved in any debates or any uh, real scrutiny. So I don't know whether she would do better. Uh, she certainly would not do better in getting my vote and votes of other people like me. There are others who would do better, but don't know if there's a possibility that Democrats could nominate somebody other than Kamala Harris. Already there's pressures from black electors, black politicians, and black leaders saying, "Oh no, you can't drop our black woman vice president unless you replace her with another black woman." Obviously, that's not in the cards. So, you know, this has become an issue of ethnic pride, an issue of identity politics, as well as obviously a desire by the Democrats to put on the strongest possible case and the former present the strongest possible candidate they can muster at this late stage in the debate in the uh, election. So the Democrats are have a problem, and we'll see how they can deal with the problem. It's not clear that they're going to be able to. The mechanisms of the Democratic Party are such that they have a real problem in coming up with an alternative at this point. So it's certainly possible that that Biden will stay in. That he will think about it hard. If he does very well in his interview with Stephanopoulos, if he does very well in a couple of other events that are coming, and if the fundraising continues to come in, he might say, "Look, I may lose, but at least I can put up a fight." And there's no indication that another candidate will do better. We know that Biden wants to stay in the race largely because he thinks Trump is a danger and to America, and that he's the only candidate who can beat him. You know, he basically said that's why he ran the first time, and I supported him when he ran the first time, not for the reasons he gave. He gave a false reason for running. He said he ran because Trump had said there are good people on both sides in Charlottesville. That's not what Trump said. That's just a lie. What Trump said was there are good people on both sides of the debate about whether to remove Confederate monuments, and he expressly condemned neo Nazis and other haters. But Biden ran because he was so offended by what Trump said and what Trump has stood for. He still is determined not only to preserve his own legacy, but also determined to prevent the election of Trump. And I think the question he will ask, because he's a decent man, is what's the best step to take to prevent Trump from being president? And the answer to that is not clear. The answer to that is not clear. It is certainly possible that staying in the race will be the strongest position the Democrats can take. There are those who believe that Trump has a plateau, that he really can't go above that plateau, and that the Democrats have enough support. Remember, a lot of states have Democratic majorities, even though they often go Republican, and that sticking to the devil's rather than unanticipated issues is a more likely scenario to victory than changing horses so late in the stream and the crossing of the stream. And so I don't know what's going to happen, but I think the story in today's Times, of course denied by the White House, but the story in today's Times recently, I mean, just released in the last few minutes, is a very significant one, the most significant story about the post-debate prospects, because I'm sure the Times sourced their information through somebody who was very close to Biden. But the if it's true that Biden is actually discussing the possibility that he might not run, that is a deal breaker. That's a dramatic change. That's something that I know politics well enough, and I know Joe Biden well enough. He's not going to be discussing this with anybody but his wife and maybe the closest associates who would never release it to the New York Times. And if I were Joe Biden, I'd be pretty angry at this point if somebody that he spoke to intimately um, was revealing it to the New York Times. I mean, that's an act of disloyalty. Of course, newspapers and the media rely on acts of disloyalty, which is one reason why I never give off the record statements. If I'm going to make a statement, I'm going to have it attributed to me. I don't like newspapers and media telling us important information without allowing us to assess the credibility of the source. We're expected to believe newspapers just because they are what they are, and some newspapers deserve that a presumption of accuracy. Others do not, and so I think we're going to see developments over the next couple of weeks. And I will make this prediction. I think that we're now on July 4th. Happy July 4th to everybody. Almost July 4th. Um, I think by August 1st, we will definitely know. I think if he stays in the race until August 1st, absent a dramatic change in his health or some other dramatic event, I think he's in there for the duration. If he's going to drop out under the current situation, he's going to do it in time to allow his successor to mount a campaign because he's determined um, for the Democrats to win this election. Or more precisely, he's determined for Trump to lose this election. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. I think that we're going to see some announcement in the next couple of weeks, and if we don't, that will be very significant. Also, Biden's views may be affected by the recent Supreme Court decisions, which make it fairly clear that there will be no further convictions of Donald Trump before the election, and also increase the odds that the current conviction in New York, the fake conviction for a non-crime, will be reversed on a appeal. And that will take away from the Democrats one of their strongest arguments that you can't vote for a convicted felon to be president of the United States. Well, I could because this is a fake conviction. If you can convict Donald Trump of what He was convicted of. In New York, you can convict anybody of anything. You know, they say that in New York, a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. In New York, a petty jury in Manhattan will convict a ham sandwich if its name is Trump. So give no weight whatsoever to that conviction. But the other convictions could be more serious. It was announced today that Jack Smith said he would proceed to prosecute Trump even after the election, even if Trump wins the election. But of course, with the immunity provisions now in the new Supreme Court decision, that's going to be very, very difficult to do. The same thing is true for the case in Fulton, Georgia, Fulton County, Georgia, because that would be covered largely by the Supreme Court's definition of immunity. Unclear to what extent the charges in Florida, federal charges in Florida, involving the improper possession of classified material, are affected by that. Um, that remains to be seen. There'll be litigation about that. Um, Having said that, I just want to repeat one thing that I've said yesterday. Oh, there was a good editorial in today's Wall Street Journal by the editorial board showing that the Supreme Court has not become a MAGA court, that it's not what Schumer and Blumenthal and AOC say, that their decisions have been split over this year and previous years. And it certainly doesn't appear to be a Trump court. I do think that the decision on immunity was generally correct. I have some doubts about how far the presumption of immunity applies to acts that are presidential in nature but not specifically allocated to the president by Article 2 of the Constitution. Reasonable people can disagree about that, as reasonable people can disagree about all elements of this decision. This is a close case. I think it's clear that it would be wrong to give Trump immunity for everything, and I think it would be wrong to deny Trump immunity for anything. And the matters of degree, balancing the need for a strong president undeterred by risks of criminal prosecution against the need to have a president who's accountable is a difficult question. Of course, that's why we have the impeachment provisions. And the impeachment provision expressly allows a president to be prosecuted for what he was impeached for after he leaves office. Now, does that have implications for whether he has immunity? Well, if he does, the immunity is obviously incomplete, as it should be, because the Constitution provides for criminal prosecution under certain circumstances. And so, um, the decision on immunity um, failed all of the decisions to deal sufficiently with the fact that we have three branches of government, and two of the branches of government have immunity before this decision. Legislatures have immunity, not complete, but very significant immunity. And the judiciary has the most immunity of any branch of government, even though there's nothing in the Constitution about it. The judges just made it up out of whole cloth without any basis in precedent or in existing law. Um, uh, Judges have always said, we're above the law. We can do whatever we want. And it would be shocking if the framers of the Constitution intended the legislative and judicial branches to have immunity, but the executive branch not to have immunity at all. So the Supreme Court was right in doing that. But that may have an impact on President Biden's decision whether to go forward. Look, as an 86-year-old, almost 86, in 2 months, almost 86-year-old man, great sympathy for Joe Biden. I occasionally forget a name and slip up, and I'm not the president though. And I have a pretty good memory, and I have a large enough vocabulary so that if I don't remember a word, which often happens, I can quickly substitute another word. I'm very aware of what happens when you turn uh, the age I'm turning, and that your mental strengths are not what they used to be. I recently had occasion to listen to me doing a debate 20 years ago. And my first reaction to my wife was, replace Donald Trump? Uh, who would replace Joe Biden? Um, should we have age restrictions? I think it was Nikki Haley who said that we ought to pass a law requiring requiring all presidential candidates over the age of, I don't remember, was it 70 or 80, to undergo some kind of competency tests. Don't know whether that would be constitutional or not. The Constitution provides specific criteria. They could have said you can't be less than 35 or more than 80. They didn't say that. We've never had a president this age, but people live longer and people are healthy longer. So the Constitution has to adapt to changing realities. So I think we have a changing reality today. I think the New York Times story, if accurate, portends a likely decision by Biden to drop out. It's not a certain decision. I don't think he's made the decision yet, but I think he's made the decision to tell friends that he may drop out. That is the most significant development since the debate itself. Having said that, for me, Biden's performance in the debate was not in and of itself disqualifying. I could understand a bad debate. I can understand a travel schedule that no 81-year-old person should have to endure. Um, there are many reasons why I would have or might still vote against Joe Biden. There are many reasons that I might vote against Donald Trump. That's why I haven't made up my mind. And I think the debate was bad for Biden. I don't think it was the disaster that it's being portrayed. Um, and you wonder, I understand how the Republicans would turn it into a disaster. The real question is, why has the New York Times turned it into a disaster? Um, the New York Times could easily have portrayed it as, a bad night, a blip, but they immediately, every columnist and the editorial board immediately turned it into a disqualification. And I suspect it's because they want a more radical leftist candidate. They don't like Biden. They don't think he's left enough. They don't think he's radical enough. And I think we're seeing some movements by people on the Democratic side to try to disqualify Biden precisely because they want a candidate who's more to the left and more, quote, progressive. Of course, progressive is the worst term ever for these hard left fanatics who have no tolerance for free speech and no tolerance for different points of view. So stay tuned. We live in interesting times. I don't know who the next president of the United States will be, and I don't know who the candidate for the Democratic Party will be. Right now, I think there is a strong likelihood that it will not be Joe Biden, but it's a likelihood that's less than a certainty. When we come back next week, um, I think I'll know more. We'll see what happened in the interview. We'll see other presentations that Biden has made. And I think I'll be in a better position, and so will you be in a better position to evaluate whether or not Joe Biden is going to stay in this race. So, see you next week.